Good. You're good.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, everybody. We're about ready to get started. Thank you so much for coming out to our last meeting before the November election. Do we have anyone new here? Anybody who hasn't been to one of our meetings before? Great. It's always wonderful. Do we have anyone who has been to one of our meetings before? Thought we'd have a few. Great. Well, for those who don't know, hopefully you know this is Indivisible Sacramento. For those who aren't incredibly familiar with us, we do two things here. I'll talk about those two things in a little bit. But first I have to make an admission. I have to admit that it is my fault that Donald Trump is president. Seriously, I did not vote for him. I obviously did not. But I didn't do anything else either. At the time, I wasn't very politically active. I had heard that it's good to volunteer for campaigns and that it's good to talk to voters and try to persuade them. It's good to make phone calls and knock on doors. I had heard all of that because I had friends who did that kind of stuff. But I also had a bunch of excuses. I had a 4-year-old daughter, full-time job, was getting ready to sell a house, we were renovating. It was just, I felt like I was too busy. Being politically active was not a top priority. Well, that all changed on November 8th, 2016. I have a feeling I'm not the only one who that changed for. I can see some nods in the crowd. Probably plenty of you became active that day as well. That was the day we learned that voting is important, but voting is not enough. You have to do more. And that's why for so much of this past year, we've been working on direct voter engagement. At every single one of our meetings, we've had the folks from California Away team stand up and talk about what they're doing. We've offered phone banks and postcard parties and just so many ways, as many ways as we could come up with to reach out to voters, to talk to them, to persuade them, and make sure that they show up on November 6th this time and do the right thing. Direct voter engagement, volunteering to help win elections, that's one thing we do here. And trust me, you'll hear plenty more opportunities tonight. We'll have plenty more things to do, and I really hope that all of you can turn out. We've got 3 more weeks until the election. That's 3 weekends where we can be making phone calls. We could be knocking on doors, and hey, if you have time during the week, that's even more time. So election night is November 6th. What happens after November 6th? Now, some people asked that. I think last week at our meeting, people asked, are we going to go away on November 6th? No, we will not. It's a fair question because so much of our purpose has been working toward that. It could honestly be up in the air, but no, we'll still be here. For one thing, on November 6th, we have to have our election night party, and we'll talk more about that later, but I hope you can all make it. But even after that, I mentioned we do 2 things. The other thing we do, and arguably Indivisible's primary focus, what the Indivisible Guide was actually written for in the first place, is we meet with our elected officials. We talk to them, we engage with them directly. If they're not on our side, we harass them. If they are on our side, we encourage them. And we do what we can to get them to resist the Trump agenda and, when possible, to pursue progressive policies. And we're going to keep doing that all next year. Even though there's not an election next year, we're going to keep on working with our elected officials, and we're going to keep on talking to them and reaching out to them at every level of government, at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level. And speaking of elected officials, I see that one of them actually just walked in. This is our guest. Our guest tonight is a man who has served as an elected official in Sacramento for over 25 years. First as a member of the city council, then as a member of the state assembly, then as a member of the state senate, and then as president pro tempore of the state senate, and finally for the last 2 years as the mayor of our great city. Please welcome Sacramento Mayor Darrell Steinberg.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I hope I'm not late and haven't held you up, but I just came from the Take Back the House fundraising event where the 5 leading Democratic contenders to take out 5 Republican incumbents. Well, one of them is an open seat. There's the bad Darrell Issa. That's what I call him. I call him the bad Darrell. I'm the good Darrell. He's the bad Darrell. And you know what's weird? We spell it the same way, which I was thinking of changing the spelling of my name. But I just came from that event where we raised a couple $100,000 in order to knock them out. And I'm going to tell you that the feeling and the momentum is incredible. And I said, in my brief remarks there, people come up to me all the time and, over the last, since what's-his-name got elected president, with this sense of despair and, what can we do and what can I do? And I always say that this too shall pass. This will not last. And of course, now we're confronted with the moment where we have an opportunity to make sure that it does not last. And it's called an election. And of course, he is not up to be taken out until 2020. But we so desperately need the checks and balances that come with our imperfect system now more than ever. And we're going to win back at least one house, if not both. And this country will begin to change back to a consistency with the best of American values, not the worst of American values. I want to introduce you to Kelly Rivas here, who is the Chief of Staff to the Mayor's office. My Chief of Staff, a political activist in her own right, doing many great things here in the community, and I would like to have a conversation with everybody tonight. I have a mission, I suppose, which is Measure U, which is on the ballot in November, which I'd like to talk to you a little bit about. But maybe more in general, I've been very fortunate to represent our great community for now 22 years in a variety of different roles. And I hope while my service has always been imperfect, that I've always delivered real results to the people around progressive values. I'm the author of the very first millionaire's tax in this country, Prop 63, the Mental Health Services Act, now generating $2.2 billion a year for desperately needed mental health services in California, in Sacramento County, and our city, the recipient of those resources. I've tried in my life and my career to focus on issues that are vitally important to people, especially people left out, that don't get the traction and the political attention they need, whether it's our foster kids, whether it's mental health, whether it's how to attract quality teachers to low-performing schools, whether it's bringing back the modern version of vocational education, creating real pathways for young people to get high-wage jobs, whether it's climate change, transportation, and land use planning, SB 375, a whole host of things. And I decided after 2014, when I termed out of the Senate after 14 years in the legislature, I thought maybe I was done and that I had had my fill. And then when this job as mayor came open, I thought a little bit about it and decided to run for mayor. And I ran because I felt and still feel like this city can be the embodiment and the representation of what the country should be. That we can create a cosmopolitan city with all the things that make people want to live in a city. Culture, art, food, the vibrancy of the nightlife, attracting young people and future generations, being the center of clean energy and alternative fuels and electric vehicles and other new, clean, shared mobility options, that we can do all that. But that when we grow and as we transform from a traditional center of state government and a government town, which is pejorative a little bit, I'm proud of it, but I realize and recognize that it's no longer a sufficient base to be able to provide opportunity for people. As we grow, that growth must be intentional and purposeful, connected to our neighborhoods, and especially people, and especially young people who are so deserving and generationally too often left behind. I know you want to talk about police violence and the relationship between the police and communities of color, and I'm happy to talk about it, of course. But what came out of the Stephon Clark shooting in March of this year was much more than just the relationship between law enforcement and communities of color. It also elevated what we've known about for a long time, and that is the consequences of unresolved systemic poverty and generational trauma and kids and people who just don't have paths and hope. And so the Sacramento that we're trying to build, which is one of the reasons why this Measure U is so important, is that we need the capital to be able to invest in our neighborhoods, to be able to invest in job training and job creation, in real after-school programs, in a youth agenda. We have an affordable housing crisis. 26,200 low to moderate income Sacramentans pay 50% or more of their limited income on rent. And it's causing, in part, an increase in our homeless problem, which is already serious. And we need capital to be able to invest in inclusive economic development with an emphasis on inclusive. And so that's why I put forward this Measure U, because we've lacked that. We've been kind of an easy as it goes sort of a city where we can make an advance, great, but why hasn't Franklin Boulevard, Del Paso Boulevard, Stockton Boulevard gotten the infusion of capital and investment that it needs to end the blight and provide opportunity for people from the neighborhoods, as an example? And so I believe a city can have it all. This is hard work, though. You know, people ask me all the time, what's the difference between being a legislator, president of the state senate, versus being mayor? And I said, it's not that I thought that this job would be easy, but I didn't expect it to be so hard. Because here's the deal. When you're in the legislature, you get the benefit of being able to legislate, big bill, big idea, and then you kind of get to move on, right, to the next thing. In the city, it's not about, in being mayor, it's not about a bill. It is about actually showing, by virtue of your policies and your work, that the quality of life is improving in the city around the areas that people are most concerned about, homelessness being a great example. In authoring Prop 63, my motivation for doing that was to try to address the plight of the mentally ill homeless. And what we've seen is that we are making, in Sacramento over the last 2 years, speaking of earthquakes, we are making unprecedented efforts in Sacramento to combat this unacceptable social condition. We're the only city in the country to get the Whole Person Care grant, $64 million, to intensify our outreach, to bring thousands of people into services, because the notion of people being resistant to wanting help is actually half true. But the other half is that these are many people who are sick. They're living with mental illness or serious substance abuse, and it takes a persistent and consistent effort. We've enrolled 700 plus people in our Whole Person Care program since we started intensively last May. We've built a triage facility in North Sacramento, which is the first of its kind in Sacramento, low barrier. We're admitting pets and possessions and taking people where they're at, and we've gotten hundreds of people into triage. We're drawing down about $18 million of state money with the county, an effort again that I helped lead this last year, to be able to provide what I call super vouchers to help convince landlords with double, triple, quadruple security deposits, as an example, to rent to people who have been homeless. We're working with the county, we got $40+ million of mental health resources. So we're helping hundreds, and we're just starting, but the problem is in the thousands. Yeah. And the only answer I have and know is to get up every day and take the medium to long view and keep working at this and keep working at it, and know that 3 years from now we'll look back, if we build these approaches to scale, which again Measure U will help with, that we'll be able to look back and say we got a couple thousand people off the street, and even if we didn't cure it, it's much better, and that people can feel and see the difference. And so there's so much great opportunity, so much excitement about Sacramento, and so much need. And I am trying my hardest to move these agendas forward. We are moving them forward, and yet I hope that the people will give me a tiny bit of forbearance to continue working at this, so that we can actually change the arc of this city in a very positive way. I'd be glad to talk, answer your questions, talk about anything that you want. Thank you for having me, by the way. Appreciate it. Yes, sir.
So what you've just said is really compelling to me. Our values are congruent. I hope that Measure U passes if it will do what you're saying it will do.
Yes.
I went to a meeting in Greenhaven Pocket just last week, and there was a person, I wish I could tell you who it was, but I don't know his name. He was a representative of the city, and he gave financial data and said why he was in favor of Measure U. The reasons he gave were that the infrastructure of the city has not been funded at the level that it needs to. We need more police, we need more firemen, and you named some other service providers. I'm just fine with more police, more firemen, but he didn't mention homelessness. He didn't mention lesser advantaged neighborhoods. He didn't mention the kind of infrastructure development that you're talking about. And so I asked him that question, what about that? And I also asked him the question, I understand that Measure U would go into general fund, and the funds wouldn't be slated for a particular purpose, could be used for any kind of purpose.
I can explain.
So how can we be assured that that's going to happen?
Did he answer your questions, by the way, when you asked him?
No, he didn't.
Well, I'm glad I'm here. So, that's okay. So, yes, the only asterisk by this measure, which is the only argument I think the other side has, is that it relates to a peculiarity of the California Constitution. Under the California Constitution, if you are specific about the expenditure plan, the vote threshold raises from a majority vote to a 2/3 vote. If you're general about it, it's a majority vote. And I may not have been that great in math, but I know that a majority vote measure gives you a better chance of passage and to be able to gain the investment that we need for our neighborhoods and our city. And so this is a majority vote measure, which means that the vision that I laid out here cannot be described specifically on the ballot. And so skeptics would ask, what guarantee is there that there's going to be follow through here? And here is my answer. First of all, I ran for mayor, got elected mayor 2 years ago to follow through on this particular agenda. And I believe I have the people behind me. Secondly, I have always followed through. I have a track record and have always delivered in the main. Not perfectly again, but have never deceived the public. And I'm campaigning an awful hard on this message of inclusive economic development. And if this money would be diverted wholesale into pensions or into city services and all, I would lose a lot of the well-earned credibility that I have gained in this community. But that's not enough. I say trust me, but don't just trust me. Hold me accountable. And here are several ways that we were already beginning to develop the system by which you can hold me accountable, in addition to the fact that I'm up for election in 2 years. Number one is that we are appointing a 15-member advisory commission to oversee the expenditure of these funds. And it's going to be a commission that has broad stakeholders, including representation from every part geographically of the city, but also with stakeholders that represent the housing, affordable housing, homelessness, economic development, youth development sectors of our city. But we've gone a step further, and 2 weeks ago, last night, we passed a resolution that begins to set up an evaluation system that will force us to report whether or not we are moving the needle on job creation, on housing starts, on youth trained, and to break it down, not just citywide, but break it down by neighborhoods. So we intend to hold ourselves accountable to this vision. And my argument to my friends in the police and fire departments, I say, you know what, I agree we need more services. We need to grow the public service. I agree with that. But you know the only way we're going to do that in Sacramento 2018 is to build a broader tax base. It's because if we don't do that, I've seen it. Here's what happens in Sacramento. When the state budget takes a hit because of a recession, the local economy suffers big time. And so does our tax base here in the city, because we're so reliant on one sector. Diversify, clean industry, healthcare, bioscience, biotech, bring UC Davis across the border, and let's collaborate and build an innovation center in Oak Park, in the Med Center neighborhood that creates 10 to 20,000 new jobs. And so I have a serious purpose here. The city has a serious purpose. This is what I'm campaigning on. And yes, there'll be a lot of competition for the money, and a lot of stakeholders will say, well, what about me? And I'm going to do my very best. There's one vote. Remember, I'm one vote among 9, but I often get my way. To make sure that in the main that this vision is followed through on. What else? Yes, sir.
2 questions. One is, do you have any concern that the increase in the sales tax will adversely impact lower income people to a disproportionate level as opposed to people that are better off? And second, there is some criticism that this is a permanent tax increase. How do you respond to that?
Sure. Two things. Number one, I acknowledge, because I think it's important to acknowledge when the other side has a good point, right? So it's so missing in our politics today. We just talk past each other. So I want to acknowledge that the sales tax is not my preferred way to go about doing this. It is regressive. Although everybody pays it, it does have an element of regressivity, but here's again the real answer. Local government cities don't have tools. We can't raise an income tax on a progressive basis. We cannot raise a property tax, Proposition 13. We can't even put forward a proposal for general obligation bonds that are paid for without with a revenue source that are paid for without a 2/3 vote. There is no other tool other than a sales tax to be able to create the kind of inclusive capital that we want and need to grow our economy in the way that I am describing. And I believe and thus the answer and the obligation is, do we return the majority of the proceeds to the communities that are paying this. And that's my vision. And that's what we're laying out here. Second question, I forget, was the...
That it's a permanent tax.
that it is permanent. It is, although the voters can always tell us to not make it permanent. But I want to explain to you one of the reasons why longer term is more, to me, is necessary to fulfill this vision. And it gets at a little bit of finance, but I think it's worth explaining. Now this, I'm not guaranteeing this, but this is one option that shows the potential here. Allow me to digress, give me just a minute, okay? There's a measure on your ballot. This, in addition to Measure U on the state ballot, Proposition 2. Yeah, I wrote that one too, by the way. It takes a small percentage of the Prop 63 dollars, the statewide Mental Health Services Act dollars. It sets it aside as essentially a mortgage repayment. And that money, $120 million a year, will allow the state, in this instance, to let a $2 billion housing bond for the homeless mentally ill. In other words, you take an ongoing stream of revenue and you use it to actually create a capital fund, in that instance, Prop 2, for housing for people in the greatest need. So I'd like to borrow that idea with Measure U. When we pass this, an additional $50 million a year. If we took half of that, $25 million, and set it aside to pay the service to establish what I call a capital equity fund, we'd create a fund of about $450 million. $450 million. And if we said to the private sector, and we said to the foundation world, and we said to UC Davis, and we said to others, you can tap this capital fund if it is providing opportunity to those who don't have opportunity. And you're willing to match it and leverage it about 5 to 1, which is really the way finance works. We'd have $2 billion of additional investment in the neighborhoods of Sacramento. Now, we may not decide to do it the way I just described, because that'll be for the community and for the city council ultimately decide. But it does illustrate the importance of a long-term source of revenue, because if it's not long-term, then you can't consider securitizing a portion of it to create a capital fund. That's a very practical reason why doing it on a limited basis does not make sense to me. People have also criticized, said, hey, in 2012 the city council said this would be temporary. It would probably be too flippant an answer for me to say, well, I wasn't on the council. So I'm not going to say that. But what I am going to say is that we're not doing any of this by fiat. We're taking this back to the voters, right? And it's the voters. If the voters are to say no, it would be very disappointing to me. But it's up to the voters, and it's up to you. And I hope you will vote yes. What else? Yes. Hi.
Hi. I've been thinking about a couple things. I don't know if they're on your radar or if you hear any talk about them. One of them is sort of an interest in boarding houses and more infill development, but also the boarding house model. And I'm interested in that because it ties into something else that interests me, which is the epidemic of loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that on a bigger scale, and I'm wondering whether the city of Sacramento has either of those things on its minds.
I love that you would raise an issue like that. It reminds me of John Vasconcellos, the late John Vasconcellos. Remember, he talked about self-esteem and was lampooned throughout the country, and it turned out he was absolutely right. That that's at the core and root of so many of our problems. And it's the same thing with loneliness, right? There is so much disconnection and so many people who feel left out. You know, whether it's what's that?
And then they go shoot up schools.
Mhm.
And they do. And it starts with kids who get bullied or who are different and aren't included, and all of that. The idea of co-housing or boarding house, I mean, we've got the T Street project. I would love to see more of that. Of course I would. Certainly for around the homeless issue, it's not exactly responsive. One of the ways we're going to deal with the housing shortage for the homeless is to use these new state resources we have to lease not just single apartments, but to lease 4 and 5 bedroom homes where we can, so that people can live in congregate living where they have some community and there's a lot of shared support. And so I think what you just said is very much on my mind, and I hope it's reflected in a lot of the policies and things I'm trying to pursue for this city. No one should feel disconnected from their city. No one should feel disconnected from other human beings. And I'm open to other ways and other ideas to.
How can I get those to you? Because I haven't had a lot of thought about it.
Okay, well, we can get through Kelly and her email. We can do that. Okay, thank you. What else?
What about the little homes that, I thought I saw some
Yeah.
talk about that.
We're trying on the tiny homes. We've got a proposal out to see if we can induce some interest. There's not an excuse. Here's the problem. When you use federal funds, which is one of our sources, at least pre-Measure U, to be able to subsidize the construction of affordable housing, there are all kinds of rules and regulations. I mean, you need to meet certain habitability requirements, right? Which is fine, but it raises the cost. So we're working on this because I do think that it is part of the answer, but it's not a panacea either. Not a panacea.
I was wondering if you could talk about the ticketing or citing homeless people for the active sleeping outside.
So this is the city's anti-camping ordinance. And it has been used at last count in calendar year 2018, I think 62 times. Most of the instances, first of all, I voted against this anti-camping ordinance when I was on the city council back in 1995. And I don't love it because I get the argument that you shouldn't cite people because they have no place to go. On the other hand, and this is a hard one for me, but I'm just going to be honest, I hear a lot and see a lot that we cannot categorize the homeless people who are homeless, all in one way, because there is a cohort of people that are different in the sense that there's a lot of drug addiction out there, and there are people who act or are in fact dangerous. The homeless on homeless crime rate, for example, is very, very significant, and so there are times where it is important to the public health and important to the public safety to move people out of where they are at, even if there isn't an alternative. And I hate saying that because it's not where I go, right? But I'm really struggling with the balance here. We had a young guy come to the city council the last 2 Tuesdays. He was very articulate, and he was very courteous, and he came to complain about this very thing. And then he volunteered and he said, you know, I'm a young man, I'm here with my partner, a woman, and we are missionaries from another state, and it is our religious belief that we should not be living in shelter. We want to live out in nature. And he was not mentally ill, I don't think. I mean, I don't think he was. I think he was genuine, but I stopped and I said, I want to share something with you publicly. I made it my life's work, and it's certainly my mission to help as many people who are on the streets as possible. We do every day, who don't want to be on the streets. But I'll be honest with you, I do not think this city can accommodate people, even if they're not near the majority. We cannot accommodate people who choose and want to live outside. I can't do it. I'm sorry, and I hope I don't lose any of your support by saying that, but we can't do it. It's way too much of a tax on our limited public resources, and there are too many public health issues, and it just plain doesn't work. And so the camping ordinance, which has a chance of being thrown out in court. There was a Boise case that came down just last week that says in the absence of adequate shelter, you can't enforce it. I say two answers to that. Number one, we must build more shelter. We got to double, triple, and quadruple that triage facility that's been working out on Railroad Avenue. But secondly, where people are obstructing the sidewalk, where they are enduring the public health and or the public safety, I'm sorry, we can't just let tent cities just grow.
What was your response to that couple?
What was my response?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what I just said.
That's what you.
That's what I said to them. I said it publicly. I said we cannot accommodate in this city people who choose to live outside because it's a lifestyle or even a faith choice. It's just we can't do it. Because we have too many people that are out on the streets who don't want to be out on the streets. And I'm not a law and order guy, but there has to be some balance here.
So when there's an imbalance and the imbalance is not fixable in the immediate I think it's great that you want to build shelters. I want to build shelters.
Yeah, and we're aggressively trying to do it. Yeah.
But so I think the concern is that if you're ticketing people, you're just making the spiral of poverty worse.
I understand. But we're not really. That's the thing. For example, they just did a quote sweep off of Ahern in North Sacramento. They did not use the camping ordinance. It was not used at all. But this was becoming a tent city with all kinds of public health problems. And they used other authorities, not the camping ordinance, right, to help move people on. By the way, we put 15 to 17 people who were living out there. We found them placed in our triage shelter in North Sacramento. We need more shelter, and that needs to be the focus. Together with the supportive services, we're building all of that. And in the meantime, we do the very best we can to respect people's rights, to respect people, but at the same time, I can't allow massive tent cities to grow up in parts of the city. The public won't have it, and I think rightfully so. Yep.
Thank you for coming out, Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor. My name's Nancy, and I live in an unincorporated part of Sacramento, so
Okay.
Arden Arcade.
Okay.
But of course, 3 blocks down is Swanson Estates, which is in the city. And so what's happening with the homeless is they're out of downtown. Now guess where they are? In my neighborhood.
It's
I
a
also
region.
live in that area.
Okay, so
It's a regional issue. Now.
I get it. I get it. But what your Measure U interests me. It's not going to be on my ballot, but it is going to be on some people
You could move and rewrite.
Property values.
Well, the thing is, I'm a part of a neighborhood community, and half of us do live in the city limits in Swanson Estates. And what we're interested in is that there's a lot of land, especially like an example would be right next to Arden Mall, where that old hotel used to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
the Sacramento Inn.
Why couldn't there have been
Because I
funds?
think there's a development plan out there.
I know,
right?
but couldn't we grab that?
How about
and-
Cal Expo?
No, we like Cal Expo. what about McClellan?
That's publicly.
Well, there
Or
is
state
parts of
land.
it, but what about McClellan? Well, I'm just giving that little parcel next to Arden Mall an example that developers grabbed it, but I would have loved to have seen the city grab it and put the, that's a perfect opportunity to put a large apartment complex there for those that
We need more sites for public housing, for low and moderate income housing.
But is it gonna allow to go out into because there's not a lot of room in the city, so is that measure gonna go out and find places?
Well, no, I mean, you know, obviously homelessness is also a regional problem. And I suppose there are two theories of how to do this. One is to create the perfect regional plan and start implementing it. And that would be 10 to 15 years. The other is to get going by virtue of what you can control, i.e. Measure U. We can go to the city voters. We do triage in our city and hope that the best practices sort of get exported to a regional approach to this. Doing our best. I'm going to take one or two more, then I've got to go. I'm sorry.
Well, thank you for talking with us. I just wanted to, on the same issue, obviously rent is a huge contributor to this problem. People at the lower echelons can't make rent, they're out.
No question.
But, so the inventory in the area is increasing, developers are building new stuff all the time. I happen to
Not
work
enough
for-
affordable though.
That's what I was getting at, like I work for a company that at some level is involved with development, and what I see from my narrow perspective is lots of great homes for people who are middle class and upper middle class being built all over the area,
Right.
but nothing for people who need it.
I don't know that, well, I don't know if it's nothing, but it's not enough. I mean, we just loaned $3.5 million to a project at 17th and S Streets, 170 plus units, half of them are gonna be for low and very low income people. That was heartening to me. That we had a developer, in fact, the late Ali Yousefi, who died at age 34, can you believe it, of cancer. This was his vision to integrate low and very low income housing with market rate housing. We need several things. We need a housing trust fund that has more than $2.5 million in it so that we can actually provide the subsidy that allows nonprofit and for-profit developers to be able to build more affordable housing. Secondly, I think we need to give some more incentives, like maybe we put fees on the back end for affordable housing or even waive them. We make the permit process go faster. And three, we really set a production target so that we're actually moving towards a goal here. And we know that the goal needs to be in the thousands. But Measure U would provide the subsidy, at least part of the subsidy, and streamline and produce. Yes? Yes, ma'am.
When you came here, you expressed an expectation that you would be asked about police.
Yeah.
And don't want to disappoint you. I was not able to make it to the discussion on Monday evening. I had a conflict. So it is my understanding that the now sidetracked AB 931 was based on best practices that have been implemented in a number of cities in Seattle long enough to be evaluated and found to improve safety for officers as well as for citizens. That's something that doesn't need to wait on state law. Is anyone looking at implementing those best practices here?
I'm sorry, the Bet 931 changed the legal standard, as I understand it.
It does.
Okay.
But there are a lot of specifics about how we expect our officers to behave to de-escalate confrontations.
So we are putting real resources into de-escalation training. The city's use of force policy is undergoing a new review to make de-escalation the first order, not the last order. We've done a number of things. I think we have a very good police chief here who understands that transparency is the first order of the day. We're releasing video from officer-involved shootings and many other incidents well before the 30-day requirement. We've changed our foot pursuit policy now to make the foot pursuit of suspects who may not be accused of serious or dangerous crimes a last resort instead of a first resort, because that's often what leads to the confrontation. We now have the state law passed that will allow the release of investigations once they are complete, and the decisions that are made regarding the culpability of the police officers. We're starting implied bias training in the entire department, and yet the work is far from complete. The work is far from complete. Kelly?
I was going to add our very third council meeting when we first took office, we actually did put forward and were able to pass just under $1 million for our entire department, all of our officers, to go through 40 hours of comprehensive crisis intervention training, as well as for a specialized unit. And to our knowledge, we're one of the only departments in the country that has all of our officers that have received that number of training or hours. Usually it's only 8 hours with 40 hours for a specialized unit or team like our impact team that works directly with our homeless population and connect them to services. So we are making really great strides as a pretty progressive police department, but there's always more for us to work on.
Everybody always loves training. We need standards.
Those, yeah, absolutely are coming through as well, and what we've just talked about and are continuing to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, on Measure U, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much. What's that? Yes, these are my names. Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, bye everybody.
Bye, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, as I said at the top of our meeting today, we do two things here. We talk to our elected officials, and we win elections. So now let's spend the rest of the meeting talking about that other one. First of all, I guess this one isn't so much about winning election as about making sure our elections are conducted in a fair and inclusive manner. But I'd like to have an update about our Adopt a Vote Center program. Jill, are you available to come talk about that? This is Jill Schellenberger. She's been really spearheading our efforts to adopt a vote center in South Sac.
Yeah, so our Adopted Vote Center at 240 CB Circle has been getting a ton of help from the people on the ground there who work with that community. There's a site office for Urban League. There's a couple of schools right there, and they've had personnel who are help. They've learned how to do voter registration from us. One guy even realized that he hadn't yet updated his since he moved, so he updated his online. So he is out there working with the community, spreading materials. So hopefully that will be generating some voter enthusiasm. So now the deadline's coming up for registration on the 22nd, and after that it's really about getting people to the vote center on vote weekend. This center is going to be open 4 days, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. A couple of us are going to be out there Saturday. So the county will have hired poll workers, but we could really use folks who want to come and spend a couple hours helping them. We don't know what the voter flow will be like. Probably Tuesday the 6th will be the day when there's the biggest need to help manage, maybe do some, because you can register on the same day, so they may need some help with that. It'd be great to have people answering questions or just filling the gaps where the poll workers can't. So I've put some blue flyers on the back table with my email information. If you guys have a few hours you can spend over that weekend, particularly the Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, let me know. Just give me a general idea when you'll be there. The other thing we could use, if you can't be there, or if you can but also want to help out another way, we would love to have a big table that is just bursting with treats and decorated with balloons and just something to attract attention and to make it seem welcoming and inviting. So if anyone wants to put their baking mitts on or whatever you do if you bake, and I don't.
Chef's hat?
Chef's hat, thank you. That's what that can is for. Please drop some off for us. I'll be out there Saturday from at least 10 to 1, and again, I've got the hours on this flyer. Drop them off, or if you can't do it then, just email me and we'll make another plan. That would be great. Thank you.
Where is it?
Oh, 240 CV Circle. I don't know. It's on my Google map. If you go, do you know
It's
what the
not far
farmers
from-
market is? The farmers market under the freeway.
Yes.
And if you cross Broadway, it's the neighborhood that's nestled right on the other side of the mill at Broadway. That right by Leontata Floyd Elementary School. I'm sorry.
Between, it's
It's a
between,
great housing
yeah.
project across.
It's actually. I don't know if it's. It's
west of that.
Yeah, there's the brick one that's on Broadway, but then there's another one that's around a circle of mostly apartment homes right around there, bordered by Leontata Floyd and a professional high school.
and behind the cemetery, it's the other.
Behind the cemetery.
Is the address on the information?
We definitely have it on
Yes.
our website.
Yes, it is here. It is on the flyer too, so be sure to pick one up. Thank you.
I said your line for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nate.
Usually the person reminding us to look at the website is Ellen.
It's
So
on the website.
indivisiblesacramento.com, everything that we could ever possibly talk about is there.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's best to talk about it here too, in addition to just having everyone go to the website, because that would be a really boring meeting if we were all just looking at our phones. So I'd like to talk about a great opportunity. I was doing this last weekend, and I'm going to pass these around. Do you mind? I'll pass out a few on this side and a few on that side. A couple more here. Thanks. If you don't mind. Oh, here. Pass that back. Great. So as we mentioned on the website, there are many, many opportunities to get involved and to volunteer, to phone bank, and to talk to voters in person. One thing that's on there is a link to the Democratic Party of Sacramento County's calendar. And I think Ellen actually prepared a flyer that is on the back table there that also has the address of that calendar. Calendar has a wealth of information about pretty much any Democratic endorsed candidate that you can think of that's around the area that we're doing anything for, or anyone is doing anything for. They will have it on that calendar. One thing in particular, what I did last weekend is went to the Sacramento County Democratic headquarters at 1033 S Street. It's a fairly small office, but every weekend, every Saturday, every Sunday, and every Thursday, they have opportunities to do phone banking. If you need a laptop and a phone, but you just show up with your laptop and your phone, and you can phone bank for candidates all across the country. This Sunday, when I was there, they were doing calls for Jackie Rosen, who's running for Senate in Nevada. I think the week before they had done Beto O'Rourke and Stacey Abrams, who's running for governor in Georgia. They have a different featured campaign every time there, but they also said that if you have one that you're just really itching to help out, you could probably, like if you're really a fan of Beto O'Rourke and you want to show up next Sunday, even if that's not who they're doing, they could probably have a phone bank for you where you could make calls for him. So it's every Thursday at 5:30 to 7:30. Every Saturday, 10 to 4, every Sunday, 12 to 6. You don't have to stay for 6 hours, great if you can, but if you can come out for a couple hours, it's good too. When I was there, they also had some people writing postcards as well. I don't know if they do that all the time, but at least that time they had a choice. Oh, that's right, you were there.
I was the postcard lady. We're out of postcards.
Oh, okay.
And bringing letters.
Okay.
So that
Oh, actual,
still
like, letters.
accommodate writers.
Oh, wow. Okay. So there are many ways to get involved there. Writing letters or making phone calls. Thank you. Really hope that everybody can, take some time. I know making phone calls doesn't sound like a lot of fun. I think the first time I did it, I was afraid that people were going to yell at me, were going to hang up on me. That doesn't actually happen very much. To be honest, most people who don't want to talk to you won't answer the phone. So if they do answer the phone, there's a good chance that they're at least willing to talk to another human being. So that's half the battle right there. I think I actually, during the 2 hours I was there on Sunday, I actually made about 85 connections.
Wow.
And most of the people that I talked to were actually on our side, willing to come out and vote. So it was a positive experience, and I really think if you come out, even if you're afraid to make phone calls, it will be better than you think, I promise. And of course, an Indivisible Sacramento meeting would not be complete without an opportunity to hear from our friends at California Away Team. Would you like to show?
I just love coming to our meeting here. So many of you have canvassed and written postcards. And the postcards over in next door to District 4, we generated 30 these houses.
Oh, wow. That's great.
People around the country, like 1,000 came from New York City every day.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And when do they get mailed out?
They're getting mailed right now. Yeah. And then for District 7, which is how it all started, our voter universe was 17,000 voters. Midterm skippers, you've heard that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we canvassed, we attempted about 5,000 of them, and then postcards about 12,000. So most of those voters have had a touch. It might have been the leave behind that we left behind when they weren't home. Anyway, so that's really neat. And I just want to thank everyone that's done any of that. There's a few more opportunities I see on this flyer. It mentions canvases over next door in District 4, the 20th and the 21st. What's not on here, because it's just being brewed now, is a canvas out of Granite Bay, the November 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And we'll go into Granite Bay, and we'll also go down into Folsom, because we have about 20 tourists that we can be at Folsom. And why the heck not?
So you're active right up until election day, aren't you?
Well, this is making it up as we go along.
Great. Great. So if we beat Tom McClintock, I might have to buy everybody a beer at our election. Actually, I don't know how much money I'll have at the time, but I'll buy some people beers because that's going to be so great if we can take that guy down.
Oh, man, well, at the beginning of all this, Ami Bera's seat, he's never won by a large margin.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of looking like it's less dire, you just don't know. So I'm gonna also count those beers when he retains a seat.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's actually a nice segue into our election night party. So I'm hoping we'll have some sort of good news on Tuesday night. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
But at least something we can celebrate, right? So we have reserved the upstairs room at Cupro's Craft House, which is on 21st Street in Midtown. It's a pretty nice restaurant / bar. We've had a couple events there. We had a little kind of a meet and greet thing there this summer. It was really loud that night because they had another event in the room next door. That won't happen this time because we've got almost the whole upstairs room reserved. We couldn't reserve the patio that's outside. I mean, people can go there as they please, but we couldn't reserve that part just for us. But we do have this big upstairs room with 2 or 3 different rooms, at least 3 television screens. There's a bar there, although I don't know if that will be staffed, but they'll have food and drinks. We'll provide some food, at least some appetizers, things like that. Our club funds can't be spent on alcoholic beverages, but that's okay. Like I said, I'll buy someone a beer if that goes down that night. So it'd be kind of you're on your own to buy drinks, and you can buy additional food if you like too, and we'll provide some food. But the important thing is that we'll all be there, and so will California Away Team. And I believe our friends from the Elk Grove Indivisible group will be joining us as well. So should be a pretty good party. You'll be with people who are on the side and on our side hoping for the same things to happen. So I hope you can make it. Starting at 7 o'clock, election night, November 6th, hopefully after a long day of turning out the vote at our vote center. You'll stop in for something to eat, something to drink, and to watch the election results as they trickle in.
Where it is and where?
It's at Cupro's Craft House.
It's on here. It's the last item on this.
Kupros.
All right, thank you.
It's on 21st Street. It's a nice little restaurant bar.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, and they've got this big area upstairs, so we're going to be upstairs, the top floor.
Will value be available?
Well, we'll see. We'll take up a collection if that's
BYOV.
Honestly, at 7 o'clock, it'll be about 10 o'clock on the East Coast. So I think we'll be hearing a lot of results from there, and then the Central Time Zone trickling in. One thing we probably won't hear a lot of is California, because there's so many mail-in ballots now in California. California that a lot of races won't be called, the close ones at least, right away. But yeah.
I have to say this when you mentioned about the mail-in ballots. My husband and I in August went on a cruise to Alaska with the Nation. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that publication, but it's definitely left wing.
Right, yeah.
And we met up with a woman from Sacramento who, and I cannot tell you her organization, but one of the things that she mentioned, because she's working with voters to get out the vote, she said, please tell people, get your ballots in early.
Yeah.
You know, don't wait until the last day to turn them in, because it's very important that you turn them in, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 days early, because then they will be counted that same day. Because if you wait until the last day, then it takes a lot longer. So I just wanted to mention that to people. Get it in early.
Make our election workers' job easier, right? That's a good idea. So everybody, actually, you probably have your ballots right now, right? So go ahead, fill those out as soon as you get home, if you haven't already. A couple quick announcements, and then I'll open it up to anyone who has announcements or opportunities for us. First of all, we have a little museum of water bottles on that back table there. I'm told that those are water bottles that people have left behind at various events, like our postcard parties and whatnot. So if you see a familiar looking water bottle back there, please grab it. Okay.
That's fine.
I would like to see fewer than 3 water bottles at the next meeting, not more. Who knows? Also, our next meeting. So we've had some unfortunate luck with meeting times this year. The 3rd Wednesday of the month has fallen on some inopportune dates. Next month, and this only happens 1 out of every 7 years, but the 3rd Wednesday of the month is right before the 4th Thursday of the month, which is some sort of national holiday, I think. So we talked to some folks and kind of got the idea that we're probably not going to have much turnout on the 3rd Wednesday of the month. So, and also since we're meeting on election night, we are kicking back the meeting 1 week. So we have this room reserved on the 4th Wednesday of the month, which is the 28th of November. So I'll be posting that in our newsletter and our website too, but just want to let you know, due to Thanksgiving, we're meeting a week later than usual. Okay, so and then I'd like to open it up to any announcements, any opportunities anybody has. Anyone have any voting? Go ahead, Jill.
Just real quick, there's another printout that we put on the back table. Another reason why Indivisible needs to keep being here and working is because the guardrails of democracy are failing in Sacramento too, for those of you who've been following with Sheriff Jones. So this is just a copy of the latest article to sort of give you it includes the part where the county council came back and said, yeah, the council or the board actually doesn't have the authority to make Sheriff Jones obey or allow the investigation to go forward unobstructed. So basically, the county charter needs to be changed. And I know that there's a lot of local organizations who are paying attention to this, and we plan to be one of them. So if you want more information, it's on the back table.
Great, thank you.
Sounds like it is.
Anybody else maybe have a yes?
Just like to let people know that Josh Harder, District 10, there's canvassing going on all the time. Weekends, you can go to Josh Harder for Congress. They train you, and they can sign a partner for you if you'd like, or you can go by yourself. It's very easy to do. I've done it for a while, and they have a lot of people volunteering, but that race is very close. It's neck and neck.
Where is that? I'm sorry.
Josh Harder for Congress. He's got a website. You can sign up for canvassing.
He's down in Modesto, Tracy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's Stanislaus
Manteca.
County and Southern San Joaquin County.
That was
They have canvassing in Manteca, Modesto, and Turlock usually.
that was actually the first race that our club took an interest in. We sent people way last summer. We sent people a couple times to Modesto and Manteca to do some canvassing. It's fun.
They
Good
send
times.
you to it's not all Democrats, but there's a number of undecided people, and it's really good to be able to talk to people who are undecided to make a difference.
Yeah,
I
and
found
actually,
it very rewarding.
Yeah, I'm gonna be spending 3 days on the ground in Fargo, North Dakota.
Oh, for hiking.
The 31st, 1st, and 2nd.
Do you have family there, or
Snooping,
just
no,
out of the
no,
blue?
Snooping for Heidi hiking.
Great.
Hi, Kia.
So, and speaking of the going to other states for Senate races, so a few of us went to Nevada last month to Reno. I see about 5 of us who were there here tonight. I can't speak for everyone, but I had a good time. It was when we met our partners in Indivisible Northern Nevada. We knocked on doors. Each of us probably got a couple hundred doors that weekend. Talked to folks, and we asked them to turn out not just for Jackie Rosen, who's running for Senate, but also Steve Sisolak, who's running for governor there. And by the way, Steve Sisolak looks exactly like Jerry from Parks and Recreation. Take a look at his picture. He's got the same haircut and everything. So I trust him because of that. So anyway, but there may be more opportunities to work in Nevada. On our Facebook site, we had someone who was posting about some canvassing.
There are more opportunities, and for all of this, for canvassing in 10, and for other opportunities to go to Nevada.
Where would I find that?
You might find it on the Indivisible website. But I just wanted on this handout, I just want to point out that one of the things on there is this GOTV 2018 master calendar, and that's the one Mighty Oaks has put together with the local Democratic group. And anything you'd want, canvassing for anybody, phone banking, whatever, is on this master calendar that Louise's group has put together. And the link is to it on our events page. And there is also a group that is organizing more trips to Nevada, and the links to those through Glenda Higgins, and the links to that are also on the events page. So if you want to go to Nevada, if you want to go to 10, if you want to phone bank, if you want to do any kind of canvassing, there's not a day now between here and the election where there isn't something available, and it's all on the website. So.
And we need your help. We really do. We need. Even if you don't think you'd be good at it, even if you've never done it before, we really need your help. Anything you can do, every voter that you reach can make a difference. Any other questions or comments or concerns or complaints? Okay.
He had one.
I will note that comment for the record. So, thank you so much, everybody. We'll see each other in 3 weeks and have a good day.